So the webinar, I think, is very timely. We've entitled it to be called the Ditch the Document Chaos. And I'd like to say that we planned it this way, but with Boris standing up and telling us we all got to work from home, this looks as if it's been planned to the day. I don't suppose I can actually put my hand up and really confirm that's the case. On a separate note, a very effective, cost-effective remote working solution, which my guys are happy to discuss with you offline. That extends the IT policies of your company to your remote sites, ensures that your customers receive the same level of service as if you were in the office, and of course ensures that the users access the same files as if they were in the office. So on that, what I'd like to do is hand over to Rupert to run with the webinar, please.
Well, thank you very much. So, Tim and everybody, good morning. My name is Rupert Squires, and I'm coughing already. I work alongside Ben Leach at Information EXP. Hello, Ben. And my role is to help work with clients to understand their challenges with document management and how we can help them solve them. Ben?
Yeah, no, thanks, Rupert. My name is Ben Leach, and similar to Rupert, so my role really is to help organisations get the most out of Microsoft 365, specifically SharePoint, IntraLAN, and training around these tools in Microsoft Teams as well.
So, just so you know, we will share the slides via email. There's a few extra slides that we're not going to show today, but we'll include. So a few hints and tips. As Tim said earlier, we are recording this, so you feel free to share it within your network. We have a very quick survey at the end, mostly multi-choice. So just tell us how we got on today, and if the subject matter was useful and you learn stuff from it. And questions. So this is very much an open forum. We've got the chat functionality. Drop them in at any time. I know Tim's going to be watching that, and he's going to prompt us accordingly if something comes up. And if it's about the stuff we're talking about right now, we'll dive in and answer that straight away. And if it's maybe a bit more specific or unique, or maybe another topic around information management, then we'll pick it up at the end with the Q&A. So with that out of the way, let me give you a bit of background of why we did this webinar and what we've seen from other organizations. So the first lockdown, what we saw is a lot of people suddenly working from home remotely, and they thought, crikey, right, we've got Office 365, we must be able to use this in a better way to help us manage our documents. So they went on, right, we're going to use SharePoint, we're going to throw our documents into SharePoint, and that means, we can work remotely, and we haven't got to worry about some of the complexities around VPNs, for example. So it was turned on in a hurry. Then what happened is there's a few people within each organization who were maybe sort of technical innovators or love playing with toys, and they would go and create their test areas. And that made it a bit confusing because some people didn't realize, is this a test area or is this a work area? Is Ben's area the official place where we should be working, or is that Ben just experimenting? And then we got to the next level of evolution where people would say, okay, let's start creating areas around maybe sales and marketing. But then somebody else would create a different area called marketing webinar. And then people saying, well, shouldn't that be part of sales and marketing? And so creating the structure was starting to drive some confusion, and we'd see that people would put different files in different places, and we'd lose what we call this vision of a single version of the truth. So when you found something, is it the document that you're looking for? And if it is, then do I go back to the person who created it saying, is this the current version or is there a newer version? And then what that led to is the way people worked is so working in silos rather than teams, saying, well, I know where my stuff is and I'm okay with that, but I'm not really sure about the team. So this is kind of some of the stuff that we've seen, and what we're trying to do today is address some of these points about how we can help make work better, and help address some of these challenges. So, and I suspect we're going to see a second round of this as we're into the next sort of 28 days of lockdown, and more of this technology is maybe used and experimented with. So in order to demonstrate these points, we have a few scenarios that we'll run through, and we'll pull on various points of the presentation. So the sales and delivery team, the creation of a proposal. So we'll show how we can do that and do it consistently in a common way. And then HR, we use HR because they tend to work with a lot of information. It doesn't have to be HR, but it could be, we're talking about policies. It could be things around, ISO compliance or risk management. So we're talking about publishing and managing policies. We're going to be talking about how we might store personnel records, and also how we might manage sensitive GDPR type information such as CVs of, say, potential employees. So what happens if you get a CV in? How do you make sure it goes away after maybe 6 months, because you don't want to be holding on to that data longer than necessary? So Ben, do you want to just talk us through at a high level what the document lifecycle is and how this starts to tie together?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Rupert. So, we're just going to sort of summarize the various stages of this. So first, we're thinking about how documents are created. And that may be, you may think of that as being quite an easy thing, but actually we've got to think about, are they created with the right template, making sure we're not just copying something that someone, copying a statement of work from a previous customer and accidentally having the wrong details in. We would then go through collaboration, so how we work in a team to actually produce that document together. Once we've collaborated on that document and produced it, inevitably it might go through some form of review process. So the next stage would be, Rupert, if you could push the button, please. Thank you. Good stuff. So it goes through a review and approval process. So you would, inevitably submit it off to perhaps a line manager or a director who needs to go and actually review and sort of put his signature on it. Now, once we've created those documents, often we'll then need to go and file them and store them in a way that we can easily get them back. So think of contracts. We need to go and find contracts in a structured place where we can review them, or things like policies. We need to go and find and search for those documents that are actually going to help us do our job. And then finally, thinking about the sort of compliance consideration. So, we all say we need to keep financial records for 7 years, but how many of us are really making sure that a particular document is actually being kept for that period of time and potentially being disposed? Or are we perhaps relying on a bit of good luck and some backup solutions? So that's how we sort of think about that creation to destruction of the document lifecycle.
Yeah, and then backing that up, I think there's 3 areas that we need to focus on. Information architecture, which Ben's going to touch on next. So I'm not going to go into too much detail of that, but adoption is, if we create this way of managing our documents, how do we make sure everyone in the organization works the same way? Because that's where these things go wrong, is where maybe a few geniuses know what they're doing, but everyone else doesn't. So working the same way drives the best outcomes. And then secondly, evolution, and that's evolution of how your business is going to change over time, evolution of how the technology is going to change over time, but also maybe evolution of the regulatory environment if you operate in that, how that changes over time. So we've got to consider these things. It's not a simple let's get the projects in and then we're done for life. It's like, well, we've got it in, we've got a great foundation. Now, how do we make sure we keep it that way? So Ben, information architecture.
Yeah, so we just sort of coined this phrase of information architecture, and the way I've sort of described this recently is, think of this as the foundations of how you work with documents and other types of content in your organization moving forward. And at the top, we're thinking about people. So what kind of roles in your organization do you have? As we move down to the bottom right-hand side, we're thinking about content. So what type of people need to access what type of documents? So someone in sales is likely to be thinking about producing proposals and contracts and statements of work. But then someone in legal doesn't necessarily produce the statements of work, but they need to be able to go and review them and access them. So as we move then over to the left-hand side, it's people, content, and access. Who needs to have what at the right time, and also who shouldn't be able to see something. So you don't want everyone in your organization seeing the disciplinary records against Joe Bloggs, but what we do want is everyone in the organization being able to access the right templates and policies. So we're thinking about these 3 pillars to form our information architecture. So what we're going to do now is just jump into a very quick demo before we go into this section. Rupert, if you wouldn't mind, put you on the spot. And perfect, good stuff. So what we're going to do here is just, we've got a demo area that's going to help us sort of describe this particular story. But before we sort of go anywhere else, we're just going to look at this homepage of what potentially a company portal or perhaps your company intranet might look like. And then we can see how the information architect starts to flow across. But very quickly, just have a quick summarize of this page. So We've got our entry point. We've got you know, company news stories that might come through. Might just put someone on, a couple of people on mute if that's okay. Apologies for that. So we've got, you know, company news that might be coming through. We've got links to the useful tools that we're interested in. So that might be within the portal, or it might be taking us elsewhere through to a separate system around, you know, CRM or something on those lines. We'll see our upcoming events. So that might be you know, well, so probably not a company barbecue or Christmas do anymore, but perhaps a virtual one. You know, the way things are. But those key events that people need to be communicated to or made aware of. As we go further down, we've brought in the Twitter feed here. Quite often it's useful to be able to show your employees how you're communicating about yourself on social media, because let's face it, not everyone wants to follow their company on Twitter or even access Twitter. It's a good way of showing how you're communicating. And finally, we've actually got my work. So you're actually showing areas and documents that you're working on, so it's kind of relevant to you. Now, Rupert, if you wouldn't mind hovering over the navigation there. The other thing where we start thinking about this information architecture, as we work from the left to the right of these types of tools and headings, on the left, we've got very much the stuff that is open to everyone. Everyone in the organization needs to be able to access vision and values, staff directory, those kind of things. And again, everyone needs to be able to access resources, policies, templates, etc. So we've thought about the content that everyone needs and structured it around that. And then we start going into workspaces that say, you know, human resources need their own workspace because it's got very sensitive stuff in it. Commercial have a workspace because we've got people from commercial, sales, legal that all need to contribute to that. Recruitment has its own kind of requirements and people that are focusing on projects. So this company portal is your sort of springboard into the various different tools and applications, but also types of content where you would structure and manage your document. So I think just using that to frame things, Rupert, should we jump back to the slide deck and
Sure.
take it forward?
So Ben, thanks for that overview, and I guess it's your starting point and your signpost. But it's going to step one of what we looked at about the I guess document flow is often when we've created documents, we either create a document based on the last one we sent out, which is in our outbox. We might have a template on our desktop. And the problems with these kind of things is maybe if your company goes through a rebrand, you'll suddenly find that people have, you know, mixed logos on documents, the old one and the new one, depending who they are in the business. You might find that legal terms have been updated, maybe on a signing area, but they're not being used consistently. Ben, must be a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing, of course, is that sometimes you'll see people will publish official templates, but they're quite difficult to get hold of. So it creates too many barriers to get that template and too many hoops to jump through. So what we're going to demonstrate now, Rupert's going to fire up Word for us, and we're going to show how these templates can come straight through into Word, which is where you're working. So we can see on here that when I go new in Word, we've got this published company, fictitious company called Contoso, and we can see that there's some document templates in here that we want to go and access. And actually the one that we're interested in fact, is the commercial document. We're just going to go and click on that, and it's just going to fire up the document straight away. That document, that template's managed in our sort of SharePoint intranet area, but we haven't even had to go to that to download it. We've opened up Word, it's brought it to us where we need it. So we can see we've got that template. We can start filling in the details, but actually one of the things you may spot is that we want to inject the client name there. So Rupert, would you just go to File? Thank you. Just go to the Info tab there, and we're just going to go and add the client metadata. Just go Show All Properties, please. Put you on the spot. And let's just go and pick from our list of clients that we want to go and work with. So that's Adder Accountants, that nice company there that we work with all the time. So press OK. Good stuff. And let's just jump back to press the back button there. So we can see that we've just tagged that document with a standard client name, no misspelling of names, etc. That's come through. We've put in a few details around this. That's perfect. Now, the next thing we want to do, we've created our template. So we've created our document from our template. We need to save the document. So Rupert, do you want to just go and press save for me? So let's go and have a look at, maybe click on more options and see where do we actually want to go and save that to. So we want to go into our sites area under Contoso, of course. That's it. And we can see we want this to go into the commercial area that we're working on. So let's just go and click on that and go and save that into the Adder Accountants subfolder, please. Perfect. Let's just go and give that a name. So although we're storing these documents in the cloud and they're in SharePoint, which may seem a bit scary, actually at this point we haven't even had to leave Word. It's just come straight to the tools that we're using all the time. But now that we've saved it into the cloud, we can see on the top left, and in fact actually quite prominently there, this document is now being automatically saved. So no more working for 3 hours and then Word crashes or your laptop dies and you've just lost all of that work and you've got to go and figure out and redo it, or go to your IT guy and try and get some form of backup and they say computer says no. So it is now being saved automatically, and in fact as it's being
We've lost him again. So I'll fill in the gaps until Ben comes back. Ben, we just dropped you there a little bit. Yeah,
my back.
Yes, on and off.
Am I back?
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep, you're back.
Good. Sorry, I'm going to go and sue BT. I don't think I'll get very far, but anyway, I'll try. So where do we get to? So as we're saving these documents, it's automatically tracking versions that we can recover as we need to. But the other thing, actually, Rupert, it's quite easy to just go and change the file name of this document natively, isn't it? Do you want to show us that?
Yeah, I think often we've all tried to rename files before, and it always get that message: this file's somebody, and you get that little problem. So actually this shouldn't be phase 4, this should be phase 3, for example. So we can just save that, and now you can see the documents updated there. So there's little things in there which makes life a little bit easier. And
Rupert, if you wouldn't mind just clicking on that header one more time, it might be worth having a quick look at the version history. Should we just do that quickly? So we can see now that we've actually started saving our document in SharePoint, Microsoft 365, it's automatically tracking previous versions. And in fact, actually, why don't we go and open that previous version, Rupert, that we've got there? So we can see that. And what we actually get is this option to even compare it. So do you want to do that?
Yeah, comparing versions in the previous versions of Word was really tricky because you had to know exact file locations of all your files, and it was a right mess. But you can see here the phase 3 on the compared version, and then phase 4 on the original. So it's highlighting those differences, and it's highlighting some other finer changes around colors, etc. But you can see how that's really quick to compare two historical versions of or a current version and a historical version of the document.
Exactly, it gives you that kind of track changes style experience to see that, and if you needed to restore it. So let's just shut that down for the moment. Perfect.
Need that. Yeah.
So we've saved our document. We need to shut that one down too. Let's just do that quickly. So we've created our document from a template. We haven't had to go and search for the previous version of the document we used. We created it from a template. We've saved it into the cloud without even having to leave Word. We've now got autosave functionality, which is great. We've got version history, which we can recover if we need to. Is it worth just having a quick look at where these templates actually get stored and published, Rupert, do you think?
Sure, let's do that. So yeah, one of the challenges obviously with templates historically, as Ben said, is they sit on people's desktops, you email everyone the new template, and only half the people replace it. So what we're showing here is actually we've got this central place of where templates sit. And actually, Ben, I can see that I've got this collection of project templates here. So I've used a folder to join them all together here. We've got a sign-off sheet, but this project start form should be in there as well. So as SharePoint's developed, we've now got things like drag and drop capability to move files around. And I've been denied access.
Demo fairies, yeah.
The demo, yeah. So as an administrator, and that proves a point that I'm not an administrator, so I shouldn't be changing templates. I'd be able to move that into the project templates folder. And these are just standard Word. When you do Word save as template, this also as well. You can put your PowerPoint templates in here as well.
Perfect. Good stuff. So one of the things we also just want to draw your attention to, and I'm just wondering while I describe this, Rupert, do you want to just bring open our fellow colleague Nestor, for instance, and navigate to the same place using him? So while Rupert's doing that, it's worth starting to think about this concept of version control. And what we're going to demonstrate in a second is how one person can be working on a new draft of a document, getting it ready for perhaps the next quarter, while everyone else is working on the previous version. So if you can see, Rupert's just jumped into this version of the template, and we can see it's got this additional statement here, commercial document Q4 amendments. Now that wasn't in the template when we created the document previously, and that's because our new colleague that we've just opened up is actually, he's got the permissions to prepare and modify templates. And this is quite often used in things like policies. You might have someone that's preparing the changes or the review of the new policy, and everyone else is using the previous published version of that policy. So Rupert, if you would just jump back to the templates library itself, please. Sorry, with Nesta, please.
With?
Yeah,
yep.
That's it. That's the one. Good stuff. And we can see on this version number here, this document has got 4.1. What that means, that 0.1 means that that is a draft version that our colleague Nesta is working on. But when we're ready to go, should we just go and publish that, Rupert? Do you want to just go and publish that that document there? So we're going to click on the little 3 ellipses there, go more at the bottom, and then publish the document. And now this is ready for everyone else. So when everyone else starts going and creating new documents based on this template, they're going to see those updates come through straight away. So should we just summarize what we've talked about?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I think hopefully that really demonstrates the point. But number one is obviously you probably have your templates already, but they're all over the place. So consolidate and define which are the versions of the truth you use with. Then we're going to put those into SharePoint in the right place, and we're making sure that Microsoft Office is configured to look for those templates. When people are starting work, think about starting with a template rather than starting with either a blank document, and you see this so many times with PowerPoint. Think, I just want to get my ideas down. And once you get going, save early and in the cloud, because then we've got the auto-save functionality. If you don't know where it's going to go, or you don't think it's ready for anyone else to see, you use the OneDrive function. And just, for explanation, OneDrive is the area where you put your personal stuff, and the stuff which, in a nice possible way, doesn't matter if you left the organization, because typically OneDrives are deleted when people leave the organization. SharePoint is the place where you want to put information to be consumed, commented, read by other people in your organization. Yes, you can share documents from OneDrive, but the general rule is if it doesn't need to document isn't ready for public consumption, or if it doesn't need to survive longer than your employment in most brutal terms, then OneDrive's a good place. So Ben, we created this document. Often when I'm creating stuff, I need to bring in your help to do stuff because you're a technical genius. Or if I'm working with Tim on something for one of his customers, I want to bring Tim in, even though he's outside my organization. How can I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've actually, I think it's probably the best thing is to demonstrate with that document we've just created. So Rupert, do you want to go and navigate to the contracts area where we just went and saved that document? Now that we've actually saved it and we're going to start working on this. So yeah, pick on the spots. We're going to go to the commercials one workspace. That's it. We go to our adder accountants that we were just looking at. Of course, before we didn't have to leave Word to do this, but now we can actually just, we're showing you how this works on the web. So let's just give that a second while Rupert gets there. Perfect. So we can see that new document that we literally just saved a few minutes ago. Is that contract phase 3, I think? Yeah. So what we're going to do now is show how we can share the document to our colleagues and then start co-authoring and working on it together to get multiple people to sort of produce that document quite quickly. Do you want to just go and click on the share button, please, and share it to our new fictitious colleague? That's it. Diego. We're going to use Diego, I think, this time. It's this is a very American demo with very American names. I think it must be a theme, something important happening in the States at the moment, apparently. So let's just do that. So we're just going to share that document over to me. And what we're going to do when I receive that, I'm going to go and open it. And Rupert, do you want to go and open this in the Word Thick or Thin client? That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, so what we're showing is the same document. You can either open it in the browser here, so you can see this, and I've got a slightly lighter weight version of what Microsoft Word offers, or I can click on open in the desktop app, and it's pop-up side. It's going to open it, as you can see, in regular Word. So I've got different choices depending on, and I typically work, if I'm doing a big piece of work, or I'm going to use lots of the advanced features of Word, I'm going to use the full fat version. If I'm looking for reference, so I'm just looking to make a few updates, then I'm going to tend to use the browser because it's that little bit quicker and lighter. So yeah.
One of the things I'm going to so we've had a question which we will just hold on to, because I think it's a very good question actually, but we'll come back to answer that question if you keep that in the chat. So one of the things we are just going to go and highlight is this fact that this additional person has just joined in. So I am logged in as Diego, Rupert's logged in as Megan, and now what we're going to do is actually start working on this. And Rupert's highlighting up here that there is someone else also working in this document. I think before we do this, just take a quick step back. When we're working on proposals or statements of work or other types of documents, I imagine that you have probably had to go through and email a copy of these documents to your colleagues to get their feedback, because you're maintaining the key version of that document. You can't just send them a link because it will be locked out. So you need them to have their copy. They'll go and make their comments and their feedback and adjustments, perhaps using track changes, and they'll send it back to you. And if you've got more than one person that you've had to deal with that with, you're going through having to review and compile 3 or 4 different edits that someone has made and then go and update this master copy. Now, with this mechanism that we're showing you here, you won't need to do that anymore. You can all access the same document and edit it at exactly the same time, which means that typically something that might have taken you a week or 2 weeks to get updated, you can get done in the matter of, a day or two, as you all just edit and focus on your sections. So Rupert, should we just jump down to the summary section of this, I think, and demonstrate
I just think,
work?
just Andrew, for your question about how practical accessible to an SME. So everything you've seen so far is part of a basic Microsoft Office 365 package. We haven't done any sort of fancy stuff which is beyond that. And I think the second part is, if you're working, if there's more than one person involved in you're creating documents, so 2 people upwards, then some of this will make sense. Ben and I, there's 2 of us, but yet we're in and out of each other's documents all the time, because I worry about the commercial aspects, he worries about the technical aspects. So often you'll find, and Ben's going to show this now, but he'll be working on one part and I'll be working on another. So this is all very vanilla Microsoft. We're not talking about 500 employee enterprises. It really is 2 people upwards, I would say, and even single people businesses, you still want a way to store your documents and you want to make sure they're protected in the cloud. And actually, we had a client yesterday, she works in data management, and she was like, I still need to keep my stuff in order, and I need to be confident that should I lose my laptop, that my documents are still safe. And that was her big concern. So yes, Ben, get back to you.
While Rupert was sort of highlighting that sort of business context, some of you possibly saw that I was just tapping away there, and actually the cursor was just sort of automatically writing out. So I was writing out my section in the scope, my content in the scope section, and then Rupert's going and writing his sections, and you can see this is still getting updated in real time while Rupert does the background. So this is, I'm going to be honest, this is probably the most important productivity saving that you can get in terms of being able to work on documents at the biggest improvement to productivity by allowing this co-authoring functionality. As I said, if any of you have had to email a document and then compile the responses, this is going to save you so much time, and it works with Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So yeah, definitely of all of the things in terms of productivity in the Microsoft stack, I'd say this is probably the biggest, actually, not to oversell it.
So Ben, I noticed you've written something about training material here. Now, assuming that we weren't on a face-to-face call, I'd probably want to call you out on that and say, well, how much? Because I'm worried about time. So today you're Diego. How much material? That's
a very good point, Rupert. It's a very good question. So actually, if I go and have a look at my comments, thanks.
And by referencing him here, you can see his name. He'd get an email in his inbox to say, if you weren't in the document, someone's made a comment and they've called and they've asked for your help. So you're not going to miss it if you manage your life through email, which many of us do. And you're thinking, right, okay, I'll come back to that, because naturally we're not always working on all on the same documents at the same time, and that review process can be a lot of backwards and forwards.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the thing. So no more do you have to worry about the document being locked when you're coming in. And actually, you can see I got notified because Rupert did an @mention of my name or my fictitious character's name. So that would come through if I was offline. I'd see that email come through and say, oh, someone's actually tried to notify me. And that would go and take me into the section of the document that I need to modify. And of course, Diego has just gone and responded as you normally would. And again, @mentioned Megan. We can then go and resolve out that comment when the update gets made. So I think so in terms of the collaboration, we've already talked about version control on this. And of course, while all these updates are happening, it might just be worth but let's just have a quick look at the version history again. We're not going to go into the same level of detail as before, but we can see that as we're making those changes and as people are updating, that is being tracked in a version history that we could always recover if we needed to. But now that we've actually worked on this document, the next step is often going to be, let's go and do that final sign off and review to perhaps, the sales director. So Rupert, do you want to jump back into SharePoint, please?
Yeah. So just say this section, we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about approval. So I think we've seen the collaboration bit. Let's go and approve it.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to go into our commercials. That's it.
Oh, no.
Whoops. No.
She's Megan's everywhere. Right.
That's it.
There we are. Yep.
Good stuff. Let's just kind of see all, I think, before we click into Add Accountants.
Oh, it was just that way here.
Yeah.
Got there.
Good stuff. So we can see this contract phase 3, and in fact, you can see on you can see that someone else has already gone through some of these other documents. You can see that there's a sort of status around some of these, and what we're going to do now, so this sign-off status, one of the documents is pending, one's approved. So we're actually going to show how we can kind of emulate this. So Rupert, do you want to just click and select that document? That's it. And we're just going to start this sign-off process. So we're going to refer to something called Power Automate, and we're going to click the Request Sign Off button. And then what we would do is go and choose the person that's actually going to do this sign off. So in this case, it's going to be Nestor, I believe, our other fictitious person. Oh, hang on. I might just need to, just click on that one. That'll be fine. Continue. You don't often have to do this, by the way. It's just the demo fairies have caught us out.
I think I'm.
Have you tried turning off and turning on again?
No, I think I'm going to do that.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Let's just try a little B plan here, because we like a B plan.
We do like a B plan. Yeah.
And this might be.
Just the job. That's it. Okay, they'll do. Yeah.
So given that I've now just changed the roles to a chapter nest, I'm going to ask Megan to sign this off. Please, can you sign this off so I can issue to the customer? So what we're trying to replace here is the whole, email something backwards and forwards, not knowing which version you might have signed off, and create a much tighter paper trail. So as you can see, started request sign off, and now this document's got this sign off status called pending. So let's see what that looks like for Megan. So come back to Megan, and in a second, Megan should see an email requesting her sign off, and there you go, bing, it's arrived.
You can tell this is a real demo. This is no smoke and mirrors.
No. So there we go. I've got this email, and this email is, a live email, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute. It's what's called an active card. So you can actually interact with the email within Outlook, either if you're using the Fit client, the application on your desktop, or within the browser, which we've got set up here. So Ben, is it anything you'd like to pull out here?
Yeah, I think that's so there's a couple of things about this. The first thing is that, yeah, we're not having to go back to other systems. We're receiving the email and we've got that option of actioning it directly within the email. We've got a link to the document so we can actually do the review, but we can actually click on the button and click approve directly within the email without having to go anywhere else. So Rupert, do you want to just do that, please? So we're going to click on the approve button. We can fill in some details, etc., and go and submit. And once we do that, oh yes, yeah, perfect. Let's put some stuff in there. Once we do that, we can state of the email. So, yeah, there we go. So that the state of the email actually changes. So again, if you were to go back to your previous emails, you would see the ones that you've actually actioned because there are no buttons available for you to do anything else. Now, we're using the web client here for Outlook, but this will work on Outlook. So provided that you've got more recently deployed Outlook as part of Office 365, it will work for Outlook, and it will also work for the Outlook application that you can get on your mobile phone. So you're not tied into just using a web interface. And again, we go back to the document list here, and we can see that that sign-off status has automatically updated. The other thing is just worth highlighting. What we've done here is a pretty simple sign-off process. The reality is that you're more likely going to create a slightly more bespoke business process. So you might have something along the lines of, if the value of a contract is above a certain amount, or if it's this particular client, it needs to go to the director because he manages that particular client. Whereas if it's someone else, then maybe it doesn't need quite the same approval. In this case, we just demonstrated it of picking the person that would do the approval. But yes, realistically, you would often implement your own business rules around this. But that interaction of being able to receive an email and push a button and sign it off is perfectly sort of available within sort of standard Office 365 functionality.
Okay, Ben, there's just a couple of questions which relate. I don't know if you pick them up now or later, but Jason's obviously asked, if you walk away and then come back again and someone's been deep in your document and created a whole lot of comments, etc., what's the best way to work through that? Is there a digest of some sort?
So when you've got the real-time co-authoring on, it won't do that. It won't do that automatically. You have got the version history if you needed to come back in and see what the previous version history looked like, as we showed you before. But the other thing that is worth highlighting, there is still a place for using track changes in Word, because track changes is that thing that is natively there that allows you to see easily what things people have done. So although Rupert and I use this co-authoring functionality all the time, we will still use track changes if we know that we're not editing at exact time. So we're all about trying to use out of the box functionality. Track changes is native as part of Word, but all of that is fully integrated into SharePoint as well.
Yeah, and Jason, to answer your question maybe a bit further, is you can have a window on the left of your screen which will pull out all the comments, but they won't be in chronological order. They'll be in the order of the document, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So it'll be in document order rather than chronological order. And then Chris has just mentioned, is version control enabled out of the box, or does this need to be turned on?
So nowadays, version control in SharePoint and OneDrive is on by default. So anything that you're putting in and changing and saving is on. If it's in the cloud, if it's in Office 365, Microsoft 365, and you're putting a document in there, it's automatically capturing versions for you.
Okay. And Ben, if you've created a document store or library, maybe 6 months ago, do you then need to turn it on for your legacy workspaces?
No, the reality, I'm trying to think, it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, since it started getting enabled by default. There's a couple of places potentially, it depends how your site may have been set up in a certain way. But if you're using the functionality nowadays, or if you're using Teams, which has SharePoint behind the scenes, it's all just storing version control automatically.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Hopefully that answers the questions, guys. And if it doesn't, feel free to chip into the comments and we'll go into a bit more detail.
Absolutely. So I think we better summarize this. I'm conscious of time, actually. It's been a great discussion. We've got a couple of things to move through.
Yeah, so a few key takeaways. The @ mention, so the @ sign, and then it will prompt you to type in the other person you want to involve. So use those to call people out, and they'll get a notification in their inbox. In terms of sharing documents, we can share both internally and externally. So you might want to think about that before you start sharing documents externally. And there are a few tenant levels. So tenant is your whole Office 365 account level security settings, which you need to have configured in the right way to enable those external sharing. The approval you saw there was a simple out of a box, but we can do more custom approvals through some configuration. So that might work for some scenarios. You might want to do a bit more work for more advanced scenarios. So then we created documents. Some documents, you know, that in terms of management, they're done once they're say maybe a contract, but maybe a policy or procedure that's going to be living, it's going to be changing, it's going to be updated maybe every 6-12 months. And also I need to be able to find these things easily. So how can SharePoint help us with that?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good way, it's a good intro to how we think about our information architecture with two different roles. So one role might be someone that needs to consume policies, i.e. everyone in the organization needs to be able to access policies. But then someone that's responsible for actually maintaining and updating and keeping these policies alive and ongoing. So Rupert, should we just go and open up the policies and procedures area in our demo environment, please? Let's just go and click through to the policies and procedures homepage.
So I've actually got a quick button here, so let's click on that. What am I looking for?
Perfect, I'm back. Yeah, so the first thing to just highlight here actually is, and I'm going to have to go and sue BT again, I'm afraid. The first thing that that we can see here, this is a page that's very much catered for the people that need to consume and find policies. So we can see a more descriptive overview of each of the documents. We can click on the actual image of the document to get an interactive preview. So if we click on that, we can actually see the preview of the document to see, is this actually the thing that I'm looking at? I haven't had to go and download it and open it. The other thing that I can do is use the filters on the right hand side to actually go and narrow down based on tags that might have been applied. So it could be, I'm actually looking for forms as opposed to policies, and I might be looking for policies tagged with human resources, for instance. And of course, the final thing that we might want to do is simply search for something. So home working, no one, you know, I would have said expenses, but no one gets to go anywhere nowadays, so we don't have to worry about expenses. But maybe something like home working is a bit more relevant, or annual leave or something. So so yeah, so we can do the search and we can see those documents come back and then narrow down and refine. So this is very much tailored for the person consuming and accessing, instead of having to just walk through a list of subfolders, which is a bit difficult to understand. But now if we go to the profile of the person that's actually maintaining policy, so let's just go into our documents area via site contents. That's it. So just click on the site contents button, please. Click on documents. And what we can see here is the same set of policies, but structured in a way that supports the person that has to keep them up to date. So one of the key things that we can see here, well, actually the most prominent thing we can see is that there's some highlighting, which is indicating that some of these documents are either due soon for a review, or in fact, they're actually overdue. We can see that these documents have a next review date, which says how they're going to be managed and who their owners are and what their current status is. So traditionally what we've seen in the past is that people will take their documents, put them into the cloud, and carry on using their Excel spreadsheets and access databases to go and track the status of policies. Whereas now we can actually do that by storing the documents in the cloud, but this concept called metadata to actually manage the life cycle of the document natively. Rupert, if you were to just jump inside the home working policy folder, please. We've introduced this concept of document sets, which basically means anything that lives inside what is effectively a very clever folder will share all of the same metadata. So it shares the next review date, owner, and policy status. But the other thing, it can have its own specific document type. So we've got policy, procedure, and form have been tagged against the individual document. But realistically, when we're worrying about this human resources home working policy, we're thinking not just about the policy, but the SOPs and the forms that will go around it. So Rupert, let's just jump up a level for a second. So that just kind of introduces that concept. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to start Now, normally what would happen is that you'd have this so it just kicks off immediately once it reaches a certain date, but we're just doing this manually for the sake of the demo. So I'm going to go and kick off a policy review process on the home working policy because we can see that it's out of date. So let me just go and do that. I'm going to click off policy review. I'm just doing that behind the scenes, doesn't matter too much. Give that a second to just wake up.
Yeah, so as you can see, as Ben was saying, we've got this conditional formatting on columns. So things which are overdue become red, things which are upcoming are in yellow, and everything else is white. Just have to be focused on what I need to work on. But I could also filter that, in a different way. So I can either group it either in its status, or I could maybe filter on things which are just reviewing the next 30 days, so I know what I need to focus on.
Exactly. So Rupert, you should hopefully have an email in your Nesta's account.
Right, let's fire into Nesta.
Just have a quick look at your email over there. So we can see that policy review has just been kicked off. Now, similar to this, that sometimes just takes a second to just wake itself up, actually. So maybe just click.
Yeah, and actually, here's the last piece. So we did that approval, which Megan signed off. And obviously, I've got an email notification to say that's been signed off. So I've got a record of that.
There we go. So yeah, that's kind of updated itself now. So what we can see, kind of similar to before, where we just had approve and reject, but what we've done is add in our own sort of custom buttons in here because we might have slightly different business processes that we need to follow. Now, in our case, just to summarize, we've got a normal approve. We've got a temporarily approve, which means it's fine, but we need to review it in 3 months instead of next year. We might have an expiry or a needs amendment kind of feedback and modify. What we're going to do is click on the temporarily approve button. Let's just do that and say, put, needs work, okay for now. Yeah, exactly. So let's just go and submit that, go and do that. Now that that's been done, let's just jump back to the policies area and we should see that that's just been automatically updated. There we go. It didn't come through immediately, but it's just done it now. So we can see that the home working policy has now been updated. Its status is current, but the actual next review date is now the 3rd of February. So it's gone and pushed it away for 3 months, and it's just kind of handled that process through automatic rules.
Perfect. So this really works well if you've got ISO certifications, which obviously, and ISO policies that you need to manage. It's a real good answer for that. So Ben, summarize. So we talked about document sets as a way of managing a group of documents easily. That could be done maybe based on your clients or your suppliers or policies as we saw today. Metadata, that's information around documents, so that helps us when we're doing searching. So you saw that we tagged things in the search there, but there might be different tags that your organization could use. This search refiner is when and you'll see this on Amazon a lot, if you search for something in Amazon, it will say, I want to filter by price, or I want to filter by prime versus non-prime, so we can set that up. And then the workflow, so you saw the advanced workflow there, where we had 4 options of what you might want to do next. So last piece, Ben, retention disposition. Retention, I mean, it's fairly obvious what that means, but maybe you could explain that. But disposition may be a new word to some of us.
Yeah, so again, it's coming back to those compliance regulations we might have. So we might have an obligation to retain documents for 7 years, HR personnel records. But then disposition means that, again, we might have an obligation to delete documents after a certain period of time. This is quite prevalent in GDPR when it says certain types of documents mustn't be kept for more, for any longer than they need to. We will automatically dispose of documents after 6 months. And this happens automatically instead of having to go through, maintain a list and go and search and update and delete manually, which is a bit of a pain, let's face it. So so this concept of retention and disposition can be automated to make your compliance regulations a bit easier to manage. So again, should we go and fire up a demo and jump into the HR area, because that's HR have often got a lot of things that they need to worry about in terms of content. So let's just go into the human resources site. Perfect. Let's just jump into our staff records library there. Perfect. In fact, it might be easier if you just go see all again. Yeah, good stuff. So Yeah, well, this is quite common. You might see in a staff records area a list of folders for each employee. If we go into the top person here, so Adele, we can see that there's a couple of documents in here already that have got a padlock around them, and they've actually got this retention label called staff records applied. Now, if we look at the bonus plan, which is a document that, again, should be considered a staff record, we can show how we can actually apply this label that locks it for a period of time. So if we just select that bonus plan document, please, and then click on the info pane, we'll see a little bit further down this option to apply a retention label. So let's just go and click on this. Apply retention label, and we can see we've created two different options. We've created a disciplinary record and we've created a staff record. So staff records are, we keep them for 7 years no matter what. They can't be deleted. After that 7 years, we don't really care what happens. They could be deleted, but we've kept them for the period that we need. Disciplinary records, on the other hand, we keep them. We have to keep them for 3 years because that's our business rules that we've defined. But after that, we must delete them because it will go and leave. It will leave their record. So using these different rules, you can define labels that can then get applied to documents based on your sort of your business rules. So let's just go and click on the staff record. So what we can now see is, let's just shut the information pane down a second so we can actually start to see that. So we can see that the label has been applied, but again, it's got this little padlock. And what that basically means is that because we've defined this as a, this label as representing a record, this document can no longer be changed. It can't be deleted. Do you want to try, let's see if we can edit this document, for instance, Rupert. So give that a second while that goes and opens up. We can see in reviewing mode, and let's see if we try and edit it, we can see that the actual options have been grayed out. Because we applied a record setting to it, it can no longer be modified. In fact, should we try and delete it as well? Send it so I can, it's basically saying no, there's a lock on this, it cannot be edited, it cannot be deleted. So historically what people might have done is go and take documents and save them as PDFs because they felt that PDFs were secure. The answer to that is no, that's not really true because you can modify PDFs in Word. But what we're doing is using the technology to lock those documents down and help us to meet our obligations. And again, instead of relying on having to go and review every single folder for the documents you have to delete after a certain period of time, we can do it automatically. Now, so that's the concept of records and how they can apply to documents. I'm going to show a slightly more quite interesting concept of how that might apply to CVs. So to just give a very quick summary, I'm conscious of the time, but we're nearly there. We all have to deal as business owners with CVs. Sometimes they're solicited by recruiters that we actually work with, and other times we'll just get sent stuff that we don't necessarily want or we're not interested in seeing. But CVs are pretty sensitive kind of data. They've got GDPR related content that we need to worry about. So how do we kind of manage this? So what we've done is use Microsoft Teams, which you may be aware of, and we're already signed in Teams now, to have a place where we manage incoming CVs. So what we've done is create a channel in our recruitment team called Incoming CVs. And I'm just going to go and push a button on my area here. Let's just do that. Press send. And hopefully we'll see that come through pretty quickly. It does normally come through pretty quickly. And what we'll see is we can basically give people an email address. So Rupert, do you want to just hover over the 3 dots there and go get email address? We can go and provide our recruiters and other agencies this email address. And yes, this email address does look awful, but you can create aliases for it. So you could create recruitment at IntraLAN, for instance, and give that to people and have it route through to this. Now, Rupert, if you just want to close that for a second, we can actually see that what has just happened is that the email that I've just sent to this channel has come straight through. And in fact, I can see the actual email. That is my real number. Feel free to contact me if you want. And I can see that it's recognized there was an attachment. So my actual CV is in there. And it's actually gone and saved this into the files area. So if we go and click on this and go into email messages, We can see that the email has come through. The CV has actually come through because it's an attachment. It's been extracted into this area. So you could store this email and this CV in a single place without having to go and worry about emailing it around to different people. You can converse about it in Teams. But the other really nice thing is that, can you see the retention label column? It's automatically defined and added a retention label that we call recruitment, which will retain the document for 6 months and then automatically. So anything that comes in here, including the emails, will automatically get disposed of after 6 months. So I don't have to worry about, I've got all these CVs flying about and am I meeting my GDPR requirements? They'll come in here and they get automatically applied. Rupert, could you just deselect that document for a second and go open in SharePoint, please? The reason why this is working in this way, and let's just jump up a level in the folder. We have applied the retention label, similar to what we showed you before, to a folder, which means that anything inside that folder will automatically get that retention label applied to it. So we've got a very quick and easy solution that we can use to manage something that's actually quite troublesome, dealing with personal data and CVs, using the power of Teams connected to SharePoint.
Yeah, so just to highlight that very quickly, number one, you need to understand the rules that you want to apply first. So this is not just something to IT and say, please turn on, but you need to give them the rules to work with. And then they can, and this is where we help define and publish those labels. And then think about the adoption. So is this something that you want people to do manually? Something that, happens by default, as you saw in the CV scenario? Or does it apply based on certain business rules and workflows? So maybe if someone approves something, then it gets logged, for example. So that is, one of the more advanced features of Microsoft 365. So if this is important to you, then there might be a conversation about which license do I need to get this, and that's where the guys at IntraLAN can certainly help you. So in closing, Ben, a couple of things. Firstly, if you wouldn't mind popping, we've got a little Q&A, so if you wouldn't mind putting the feedback form in the link, that'd be super. And naturally, that's using Microsoft Forms. So the actual tool we're using for feedback is all part of the Microsoft suite, and you have access to that. Are there any other questions that we haven't picked up already? Obviously, we've had a few from Chris and Andrew, Jason.
I've got one question here, Rupert, from earlier on. This is saying that they've got half their files on their file server and half in SharePoint. What's your recommendation?
Yeah, I think scenario, but you've started working in SharePoint maybe at the beginning of this year, but you haven't done anything about your legacy. And we help organizations, A, make sure we structure SharePoint in the right way, so it's going to support how you work, A, now, but B, going forward. And then secondly, we'll look to migrate both the files on your file server into SharePoint, and we can do that at scale. When at scale, it could be, gigabytes, terabytes. But also we'll help you rearrange the content you've already got in there so it's in the right place. So that's the kind of projects that we take on. And it actually is probably a good segue to find out, what role do we play in all of this? So 3 things that we do. We have a couple of package solutions to help you. So it's like, right, if I want document management, how can I get there? And I'll just explore those quickly on the next page. We always work on a fixed price basis, so there's no surprises of, oh, well, that costs more than I expected. You know what it is up front, and we're there to provide support to people who, who deploy document management solutions because they think, well, help, how can I do this? And again, we do that on a fixed price basis. It's not based on time. It's as a service. So those are all the areas that we help. And if any of these are of interest to you, the guys at IntraLAN can actually help you, and we can join us all together. It's probably worth just highlighting a couple of offers that we do have for SMB, and we see it as 5, some key areas here. So how do I start right? So we talk about implement document libraries and branding to make sure it's got your color and logos. We're creating templated work areas, and that might be for HR. It could be sales, marketing, put your client areas, supplier areas, but also a separate area for directors to do their thing, so they can get out of email and start putting their, maybe business plans and that kind of things together. We talk about, we can help you with document approval, and obviously none of this adds any value unless we're going to train the organization and help you guys actually use it effectively. So that's our base level entry offering. We have a much more advanced offering where rather than just giving you templated work areas, we'll work with your individual, HR lead or your sales leads and marketing leads to make sure that the areas that we create for them work exactly as your organization needs to work. Because we know every organization is slightly different. And we'll also support you getting teams up and running in the right way. And you may have it going in some elements, but maybe not in others. We'll go a bit deeper on business processes around things like new joiners and client onboarding and how we can help set that up accordingly. And in terms of engaging your clients, so we can do things like, well, can I have a client area where I can bring my client in and they can work, we can work on the same documents together, or I can share maybe my plans with them or a schedule of works. And digital signatures, that's a big one right now. So how can I use digital signatures within SharePoint? Now there would be a license to buy a digital signature tool, but what we help you do is use that within SharePoint rather than having to take a document, drag it onto your desktop, and then drag it up into something like DocuSign. So we can make it part of the integrated experience, trying to remove the friction from your processes, also remove any opportunities for error and mistake. So Tim, I'm going to leave you to hand over to talk about the commercials on these, because obviously that's where you come in. Yes, we're the delivery experts. So
okay, thank you, Rupert. So after saying you're going to leave me to pronounce about the commercials, you've already put the numbers up there. You can see that everything that's labelled in blue, which will really be aimed at the smaller end of SMB, the S part of SMB, will be able to be done for a fixed price of £3,000. When we actually move to the green part of the presentation, which is more the M part of SMB, and this is totally dependent on numbers. That's whether the numbers of gigabytes of data that you have or numbers of employees that you have. That would be a fixed price of £8,000. That being said, it's coming up to Christmas and end of the financial year, etc. What we can do to the attendees of this webinar is we can apply a 10% discount to those prices, providing, of course, that these projects are kicked off during this year. So if anybody has any interest in that at all, please make contact with us at IntraLAN, and we will work our way through that. Those enormous quantities of leads that come in, and engage with Rupert and Ben accordingly.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, and I think the main thing is this is not a we go and turn something on and disappear. This is very much hands-on, working with you to make sure you're really comfortable with technology. So we're not just simply implementing a template and then disappear. It is very much empowering you to use this technology and feel comfortable with it. So next steps, we've sent over the survey. We pop that in the window there, and after the survey, we will send over a deck with a few extra slides in there. There's also, we've recorded this, so we'll make that recording accessible, so feel free to share that within your network or on the people you work with. And if you'd like a call, please do drop a note to Tim. I mean, I'm sure your account manager will ask for feedback anyway, and he can help you further. So thank you for your time.